Ooh, almost knocked it over. So welcome everyone to week 3. Who hasn't been to the Adam? Is this your first? Okay. Hi, Adam. Nice to have you here.
Don't worry, it's not anonymous at all.
It's not, nothing's anonymous. So we've done 2 weeks so far. Week 1 was, and they I think flow into each other. I'm trying to do this in a way that at least there's some sort of linear flow. Week 1 was discovering the appearance and then growth of Reform Judaism and where that split happened, the differences philosophically, theologically. Last week, which was now 2 weeks ago, we focused much more on the Orthodox claim and why it rejected the alternatives that Reform was putting forward. We now go back to the future, back to the exact same time period in European Jewish history, but this time from the perspective of another solution. So remember the single great problem facing Jews, didn't matter where they were living in Europe, was what in the 18th century and 19th and 20th. It's never gone away. The problem was persecution, but in contrast to what's crucially happening all around us in Europe. Not now, in the 18th century, 19th century, so there's emancipation. So we're watching the growth of the modern democratic state. Slowly but surely, people are being given citizenship and equal rights and opportunities, and although things are improving for Jews, they are lagging behind massively. And our journey this week takes us to a particular country in Europe that wasn't just lagging behind, it actually got worse. Okay? And that country is Russia. So Russia plays an unimaginably important role in the growth and development and spread of Zionism as an ideology. So Zionism essentially is a solution to the same problem, is it not? And it still is. We're going to come back to this when things hopefully start heating up, not just because of the temperature of the room, but because of the content of the conversation. But Zionism presents itself. You've heard Netanyahu giving speeches about this the whole time. Yeah? I detest it when he does. I'm going to be very honest. When I'm up there in Shul, I never ever reveal my political opinion. But I have to here because I'm the one presenting it. It's a disservice to you if I don't. I don't like it when he gets up and sort of says to everyone, look at the anti-Semitism in the world, everyone come to Israel. I'll explain why I don't like that much later on. But it's presented as a solution to exactly the same problem that Jews across Europe are bothered by. So I put a few, as we've always done, a few sample questions. What are the sorts of questions our youngsters are going to be asking us nowadays? So here's a very typical one. There was a recent survey done among non-Jewish university students that showed how many would refuse to share a flat with a Jew?
It was 1 in 6 or something?
1 in 5. Slightly worse. So 1 in 5, and how many of those had even met a Jew? No, negligible. Something like 5 to 10% of them. And all of them said unanimously the reason why I wouldn't want to share a flat with a Jew is a few because they're Jewish, but most of them because of perception of support of the state of Israel, and I wouldn't want to be swept up in, so I wouldn't have, I don't want marches outside my student digs, so I wouldn't want to share a flat. Okay, so question 1. My new flatmates.
It's amazing to know what that number was 3-4 decades ago, because it might not have changed all that much.
It might not have.
And the demographic of students has changed as well.
True. It may have been exactly the same response, but for a different reason. It may have been because they're Jewish.
Exactly.
That's why.
And some of the individuals who are very common in some of our universities have been brought up to think that way.
Yes.
Regardless of what's in the news.
Yes. Particularly among the more sort of academic elites, where it's very vogue to be,
Or if you're hard left, for example.
Yes, yeah. So it is an interesting one, but questions that come up the whole time now is, my new flatmate said I have to get out because I support Israel, what am I meant to do? Now, there's practical help to that question, but often our youngsters are seeking more than just speak to the UJS, speak to JSOC, speak to CST. They're looking for more than that, speak to chaplaincy, they're looking for more. Very common as well. I've heard this from a number of parents with children in secondary school who said, kids come home, I got shouted and sworn at today on my way home from school today. I know of one kid here who was pinned against a wall by the throat on his way home from school and was it was demanded of him that he explain Israel's actions at the age of 12. You know, how do you justify genocide? And he's 12 and he's been pinned up against a wall on his way home from school. It's happening more and more. Question 3 is one that we have to swing back to at the end, which is not just a subtle shift, but a very, very significant one that could possibly happen in the next 20 years, if it's not already happening, is, Mum and Dad, if I don't support Israel, will that affect our relationship? And how we would navigate that as parents. Not so easy. Okay, so we're going to run through. We've got a timeline. We've gone all the way back again to the 18th century. Crucial moment, 1791 is the partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Russia takes possession of millions of Jews. It wasn't expecting this as part of the bargain. It didn't want them, the Russian Empire. But suddenly Russia becomes home to the single largest Jewish population in all of Europe. And the Tsars don't like the Jews and don't want them there, but now they're stuck there because we want the land, but we'd rather not have the Jews who happen to live on it. So what are we meant to do? Now, you're probably familiar with a lot of the history. 1827, the Cantonist Decrees. What were the Cantonist Decrees under Nikolai I? Conscription into the Imperial Army. So conscription was mandatory for all Russian men, but when it came to Jewish Russian men, they weren't men. They were conscripted from the age of 12. Why 12? To circumvent, the way that the state officially explained it was that you need re-education. You need to be made Russian. You're too Jewish. So before you officially become Jewish, when you turn 13, we'll conscript you to the Tsar's army. The minimum term of service is 25 years. But if you're Jewish, that starts the same time as it does for any Russian individual, which is when you're 18. So 12 to 18, we're reprogramming you because you're too Jewish. And then from 18 until, I can't count, 25 years after that, 30, 43, when you're 43 years old, you're free to go home.
What was life expectancy then? 44?
And if you're in the Russian-Japanese War, 23. So there was a campaign, and we now have access to documents that essentially said that battalions were commanded, they were ordered to put their Jewish units at the front in the vanguard to be cannon fodder. So I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty of what was going on in Russia, but simultaneously, which is also quite fascinating, is in 1830, with people like Lord Palmerston, for example, was the rise of evangelical Christianity in Great Britain. So evangelical Christianity became quite vogue in Victorian Britain. And what does that believe in? We're going to get back to why this could be dangerous later on. But that version of Christianity believes it's massive in America. You heard of AIPAC? You've heard of AIPAC? Yeah, AIPAC. So AIPAC is a combination, essentially, of evangelical Christians and Jews, American both, who are on the same page about Israel, but obviously different pages religiously, because one's Christian, one's Jewish. They believe that
Jews have to be in Israel.
The kingdom of heaven cannot be established in the second coming. The kingdom of heaven cannot be established unless the Israelites live in their homeland. Okay? Now, what happens after that is subject to debate. The more extreme wings of evangelism. Yeah. It's one of them. The more radical side of that says that once we're all gathered in, the gathering in of the exiles to Israel, then Jesus returns and converts us all to follow him. That's why we need to be there, in his homeland. The less radical, who are a bit more accommodating of Judaism, say, no, you go back there, but it's still going to be a prerequisite for the kingdom of heaven and the Saviour returning. Okay, I think you can tell already why that could be quite dangerous if it's mixed into Jewish Zionism. Okay, so what's happening in Russia is that the situation is rapidly getting worse for Jews, but elsewhere in Europe, suddenly people are sort of becoming a little bit Zionist, even if they're not Jewish. 1878, Rosh Pinah and Petach Tikva famously are established as the first modern Yeshuvim. Yeah, Rosh Pinah, I think, is in the north from memory, and Petach Tikva is in the Shvela in the central lowlands. 1881, Tsar Alexander II is assassinated, and of course the Jews are blamed for assassinating him. This sets off pogroms across Russia. The same year, in response to those pogroms, Chovevei Tzion is founded, which Odell means Chovevei Tzion.
Lovers of Zion.
Yes, lovers of those who cherish Zionism. This is the first real mainstream Zionist movement that's established in response to what's going on outside. And immediately in 1882, which is a very important year because that's when Spurs were founded, but also in 1882, you can see there Nathan Birnbaum, who as far as I know is not an ancestor of mine, but Rishon LeZion. Anyone here been to Rishon? Nice beach there, Rishon LeZion, yeah?
It's very modern. I didn't know it's back so old.
So Rishon LeZion. It's called. Why is it called Rishon LeZion? What does Rishon LeZion mean? The first. So that was the first Russian settlement, as it were, a town that was built by Russian immigrants who were members of Chovevei Tzion. They came and they established Rishon LeZion on the coast. Leon Pinsker, a Russian Jew, secular, he writes a book called Auto-Emancipation. Now, what does that mean and why is that important? Auto-emancipation.
You emancipate yourself.
Yes. It essentially means like we're giving up. We're not waiting for Europe to do it for us anymore. We're going to do it for ourselves. And then in Western Europe, in Vienna, Nathan Birnbaum, again, don't think any connection to me. He publishes almost an identical work at the same time, just a year later. So these are the first like proto-Zionist books that have been written. 1894, crucial year, is the Dreyfus Affair. Now, there's a debate among historians, which is just how it could be that Herzl romanticized it and said that's what drove him to sort of invent political Zionism. We're not sure really. He was definitely there. He was reporting for the Viennese, what was the name? The Free Press. Viennese, I don't know the German for it. He was there as their Parisian reporter, and he definitely was shocked. But more, really what shocked him was he said it was plausible that Dreyfus was guilty of spying. But what shocked him was the response of the crowd, because he saw that the crowd's anger and hatred wasn't against Alfred Dreyfus, it was against, they were shouting, death to the Jews, in whatever that is in French, over and over again, death to Jews. And he says he's standing there in 1894 in enlightened France, and this is what they're shouting.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Bearing in mind I wasn't there though, so yeah.
Okay, well you might know. When we're talking about the crowds there, or even back a few years earlier when the Jews were blamed for Alexander II's assassination,
Yeah.
How many Jews were there in society then? Was it a larger proportion than we have today in our European countries?
In Russia, certainly. Russia, unless my memory, Russia was between 3 and 5 million Jews, as far as I remember. And then after the First World War, huge numbers of those went into Poland, which then also became 3 million plus.
And even World War II, Poland was 10% Jewish.
Yes.
10%.
Yeah.
I think that was 3 million people.
That was around 3 million. And France in Paris had an enormous Jewish population. I think similar to now, where there's hundreds of thousands. So we were quite visible. Ironically, the one country where we weren't all that visible, right up until World War II, was Germany itself. It wasn't such an intense concentration there for some reason. In the major cities, certainly. Germany, there were many communities in the smaller towns, but when it comes to major cities, you'd have to go to France. Russia, of course, we can't move out of the Pale of Settlement. You know the Pale of Settlement? Pale of Settlement is an area in Russia that was roughly the size of Austria, maybe slightly bigger, and Jews are not allowed to live outside of there without special permission. So that we were all kept in one place, so that if we need to be made an example of, the authorities know where to find us. Just think of Anatevka. Yeah, Anatevka, you've all seen Fiddler on the Roof? You managed to get through all 4 hours of it, yeah? So the pogrom, disrupting the wedding and then kicking us out, that was our life in Russia from year to year. Pretty much every Easter, there'd be a pogrom, then we'd be kicked out of town and move along the road to live somewhere else. That was our life. So Herzl publishes the Judenstaat, the Jewish state, 1897. First World Zionist Congress is in Basel. He convenes it. And then in 1898, we're going to get back to, he accompanies Kaiser Wilhelm on his trip, his royal visit to Palestine. Okay, we'll get back to that trip. Jump down to, we've got Protocols of the Elders of Zion in 1903, Kishinev pogrom. So the Kishinev pogrom in 1903, what was different about it was that it was led by the clergy of the Russian Orthodox Church. So they spent their Easter droshes, as it were, their Easter sermons, rousing up this crowd, and then they led them out into the streets of Kishinev. And what was so shocking about Kishinev is that dozens of the victims were children. And we have, what's different to this compared to earlier pogroms is that we have photos. Don't look it up, it's horrific, but there are photos of just dead bodies strewn in the streets with Russians just laughing at them. And the difference with the Kishinev pogrom is that it made the international press, particularly in America, and President Roosevelt openly condemned the Tsar and said, how on earth, and this isn't even the 19th century anymore, this is the 20th century now. How can you allow this to happen by your own clergy on your own streets in the 20th century? This led to, if you know your American history, an enormous influx of immigrants from Russia to the United States. Enormous. I think the Lower East Side had about 500,000 of them in a few square, all from Russia, because it was so unbearable. At the same time, in 1905, our beloved country passes the Aliens Act, which ironically was drafted by Lord Arthur Balfour. Yeah? And Balfour said, we recognise the dire situation for the Jews of Russia. We can't let too many of them in here. That was the Aliens Act. It was dressed up, and it's in the news now. Immigration's always in the news. It was dressed up as being like, oh, well, it's not really just about the Jews, but everyone knew it was about the Jews. And specifically the poor, bedraggled, illiterate, uneducated Russian peasants who were desperate to flee for their lives. So ironically, it was Balfour who denied entry to the Russian Jews. Very small numbers could come here, which is what diverted many of them to the United States. Okay, so that's 1905. Then we get into the proper era of Zionism itself, and in 1917, the same Lord Balfour writes a famous letter to Lord Rothschild, and that letter is the Balfour Declaration. Now, we'll pause for a second just to read. He expresses his, and I quote, sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations to, and I quote, view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. So one thing that is never discussed in polite company about the Balfour Declaration is it doesn't actually call for the establishment of a state. It simply says a national home. That is not the same thing as a state, and it was debated among British politicians, it still is debated, for decades as what Lord Balfour actually meant when he wrote that.
National state. What did he mean then? Yeah.
Depends who you ask.
The word national is state.
Churchill, for example, although he was very pro, in his own funny way, the Jewish community, he had like typical anti-Semitism that was like the sense of humour at the time, but he was in favour of the Zionist aspiration. He was certainly had many, he admired many people in the Jewish community here, but Churchill very firmly wrote that he didn't think it was a state. It's a national home. It means a home for the Jewish nation.
A home is, but home is state.
Doesn't mean they would take it over. They could just go
It's the
there.
home for the nation, it's not a nation.
If you rent a flat, it's your home.
National home.
אני לא כתבתי את הכתובת הזה, לא.
National stadium is your home stadium. You're this. I mean, national means
It's
nation.
subject to enormous debate, of what it actually
It means
means.
they could go to that country. It doesn't mean they could take over that country.
Yeah, make us
Correct.
Make it.
וגם זה לא פשוט. Herzl himself entertained the idea, and what he was doing with Kaiser Wilhelm, when he was talking to the Kaiser on his visit to Palestine, the vision Herzl was presenting him was not to have a Jewish state. It was to have a German protectorate. The Kaiser would be our king, and the national language would be German, not Hebrew. So it was never even that simple among Zionists of what is it that we want.
They
Remember,
didn't really aim that high yet.
because what are they
They went
solving?
baby steps.
They're
Just
solving
this,
different problems
just
though.
this.
Maybe.
Be okay.
Yeah, maybe they're
We
already
keep your language.
they're already showing the Israeli gift of haggling.
It's like give
I
your
don't know.
finger, you will know love in Israel.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, it's like going to the shuk and you come out, you spend. Yeah, maybe it's like that.
And when you're in a desperate state, you'll settle for whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, whatever helps you survive. survive. You've got pictures of Jewish children dead on the streets of Kishinev in the 20th century. That's what we need to avoid. And whatever it takes to avoid that, because we're not getting any help from anyone else, we'll take it. Okay? And in 1918, the League of Nations, which obviously, because Great Britain pretty much controlled it, ratified the Balfour Declaration. Good. Right. To understand Zionism, any questions before we do a deep dive into the two strands of pro-Zionism and two strands of anti-Zionism? We're going to have some fun. Any questions before we dive into? No? No? All right. Secular Zionism. How would you define secular Zionism? I've got mine in yellow. Don't look at it. That's my definition of it. Don't look. Don't cheat.
A little bit like reform. That we're gonna just be like everyone else, make the state like everyone else.
But then why are we moving?
Morals of the world.
It's similar. There's overlap. Though remember, the early reformists were very, very anti-Zionist, because what do you mean? This was their quote, Berlin is the Jerusalem of Germany. They removed all references to Zion and returning to our homeland from the Siddur. The early Reform Siddurim removed all references to returning to Israel, because that's anti-patriotic. We're meant to be proud, not German yet, because Bismarck hadn't united, but we're proud Prussians. We're not Zionists, so... But yeah, secular Zionism. Definition I've given, which I hope is helpful, is the establishment of a homeland for Jewish people is meant to address the apparently unsolvable problem of anti-Semitism. The main goal is to save Jews, not necessarily Judaism. Okay? Saving Jews is what we're here to do. Let's meet three important people. So
it's
Israel...
not a religious entity of a country.
Sorry?
It's not a religious entity.
Religion and Jewish culture is secondary. The main thing is...
Go somewhere where people will leave them alone.
Yeah.
You don't need a religious reason to save your life, do you?
No. It seems pretty clear. We'll get to Herzl in a second. It's pretty clear from Herzl's early essays and speeches that he looked at the land of Israel as an incubator for us to just build our own, to show the world. Like, if you just leave us alone for 5 minutes and let us get on with it, we can build our own state and it'll be just as brilliant as any of your states. Just give us this incubator and leave us alone. That's what he wanted. Israel Zangwill, though. Any JFS? Carl, that's not us. We didn't have this stuff in our Haredi education, yeah? Zangwill, still a house in JFS, yeah? What? Who's been in there? Two boats in Zangwill? Two yellow ties. Yellow ties. My dad was in Zangwill, I think, as far as I remember. So Zangwill's one of the houses in JFS.
Mine is in A-levels now, but I don't think he has houses.
No, they don't have it, because they don't have the time.
No, they don't. What? So because we don't have ties, we don't have
But they do
houses?
still have it, but they don't do anything.
They don't have houses.
No?
I don't know what house it is.
Well, I'm in Gryffindor, so there you go. So
But Ben said Zangwill is the Hufflepuff of JFS because it's yellow stripes, it's irrelevant on the yellow tie.
he's also probably one of the most controversial. I was always shocked that JFS had Zangwill as a house.
Because they needed A, B, W, Z, so how...
A, B...
A and B.
Yeah.
The opposite
Angel.
sides of the alphabet.
A and B.
Weitzman. What's the B again? Angel.
Brodetsky.
Brodetsky. Oh, so they just got Z because, oh my goodness. God. A school
Maybe
was...
more
A
thought
school...
went into Zion.
Yeah, 250-year-old school. That's the best they could come up with. The reason I'm shocked at it is because Zangwill started off close to the other main founders, Sir Herzl and Max Nordau, but he grew very pessimistic and disillusioned that the likelihood of being able to establish a new state in a little strip of land that already had 600,000 inhabitants who had no interest in that state being there. We'll get back to this very, very shortly. He also saw the urgency of the situation in Russia, and he founded the Jewish Territorialist Organization. He was really the first main voice to say, we don't need to go to Israel or Palestine. We can go to... Greenland, no, because that Trump wants Greenland, so we can't go to Greenland. Madagascar's one, British Ethiopia, Uganda's one, Texas was one. Yeah? Can you imagine if we all talk like, we're all like cowboys? That'd be fantastic. So Texas was one, Madagascar.
Naz Shah got it. Didn't Naz Shah say that all the Jews in Israel could move to some small area in the USA?
That's probably where it's from. We were going to be given like 40,000 square miles in Texas. Alaska, that's another one. You know, can you imagine Shabbos in Alaska? It goes out like 2 days after it comes in the summer. Like goes out on Wednesday. It'd be a nightmare. Sorry. Sorry.
Had it have been Texas, whether we have to remember the Alamo.
Yeah, remember Amalek and the Amalek. Yeah, right. So that's Zangwill. Herzl is the second figure that we meet in secular Zionism. He's renowned, he's the father. But it's not just because he has an impressive beard, but he's the statesman. He's the brilliant public speaker, he's the journalist, he's very, very educated, he's charismatic, he's dynamic. So he's really seen as the figurehead of secular Zionism. And again, as I mentioned, he initially was okay with British Uganda. So he met with Lord Chamberlain, and he said he was okay with it. We won't know the extent to which Herzl was actually in favour of not going to Palestine. He died very young. And crucially, he died before the 7th Congress, which is when they voted, do we specifically want Palestine, or would any other country do, such as British Uganda? Okay? So we will never know entirely, but certainly his later writings seem to indicate that he was souring on the idea. He was leaning more towards it has to be done in Palestine, because how else are you going to motivate people, Jewish people? How can you motivate Jewish people to build a state in Uganda? Nothing against Uganda, but on Madagascar, you know, where King Julian lives. How are you going to motivate? Yeah, how are you going to motivate them to build? The only place they're going to do it, that they're going to, turn swamp and desert into cities, is where they care about the land. So it seems that's what he felt towards the end of his life, and his Zionism became dominant. Then Achad Ha'am, Asher Zvi Ginsburg, he clashed with Zangwill and Herzl, and his critique was, even if you want to be secular, you cannot abandon Judaism to save Jews. That's not a worthwhile exchange. You can't do that. You have to maintain a clearly Jewish character for this homeland, for the Jewish people. And he said, in quote, it has to be a Jewish state, not merely a state for Jews. Subtle, but very, very important difference.
But he's also using the word state, not homeland.
Correct, yeah. But again, he wrote this way before the Balfour Declaration. So these are all 15 to 20 years before Balfour, before the Declaration. He also, if you want to know the truth of all the secular Zionists, so my own, Libi Omer Li, my own heart, lies with Ginsburg, with Achad Ha'am. I think he was very prescient. He really understood what Europe was like and what Europe was capable of being like. And I think he hit many nails on the head. He also grew more and more disillusioned and said, why are you trying to build a state that's essentially the same political model as the same countries who are persecuting it? We said this when we spoke about reform a little bit. Why are you mimicking and aping countries who are persecuting you? It's clear that their political systems aren't working, so why are you trying to copy and paste them? I was speaking to an Israeli last week. He said, the biggest problem with Israel? Odell, the biggest problem with Israel is that we took a bit of the British, a bit of the Ottomans, and a bit of the French, and we mixed it all into a cholent or into chamim, and it's a mess. Is it? Yeah. Nachon.
Please everyone.
Yeah.
They want to please everyone. You could see. They have,
But it's also, we have to understand, the early secular Zionist leaders, Herzl especially, were enamored. They worshipped the secular democratic states that they lived in. They wished, again, we want to be Germans, we want to be French, we want to be British, we love these cultures, but for whatever reason they won't accept us as we are. So give us an incubator and we'll show you how much like you we can be. It's like the Jungle Book, I want to be just like you. It's like that. Walk like you, talk like you. That's the whole thing. You've got to learn. We're not like them. So
the whole idea of being that they would have had Uganda or whatever other country, but that's the ultimate game, is to go back to where the temple was, and so they would use that as a stepping stone.
The secular Zionists were not interested.
They didn't care.
No, rebuilding. Rebuilding the temple and talk like that would have been totally off the agenda. Yeah, it's just to have a political incubator.
And biblically, forget all that. wipe that clean.
Yeah. So, again, eventually, and it's because of Russia, we'll get to it, that the idea of going like to Madagascar or Uganda, it was the Russian delegation that stormed out the 7th Zionist Congress and said, we're not even voting. We're so disgusted by the fact they're even suggesting it. We're the main reason Zionism's important, the Russians said. We're the ones suffering more than any of you, which they were. By this point, pogroms were weekly. It was out of control, the pogroms in Russia. Whenever anyone looked a priest or a non-Jewish Russian the wrong way, pogrom, blood libel. And they said, you're not taking our considerations into account. We're not going to Uganda, not because it's much hotter than Russia, because we're not suffering just to go to, a country that's not ours. So, essentially, Ginsburg was this voice of caution, again, who said you can't detach Judaism from saving Jews. If you're going to save Jews, you have to save Judaism with it. And number 2, he cautioned, stop trying to mimic the very states who you're running away from because they're persecuting you. Okay? Is that all clear? Okay. Well, we can come back to the strengths and weaknesses later on. Let's go over the page. What about religious Zionism? What's that? What's religious Zionism? Where do people like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, where do they come from?
Saving Judaism.
A bit more.
Is it all basing the return to Israel on mentions of that in all of our in the Torah? And
yes. So again, religious Zionism sees religion within Zionism. And crucially, I've given it, I think, a helpful definition here, which is the establishment of a homeland for Jewish people is meant to fulfill the words of the prophets, who foresaw the final redemption and the ingathering of exiles. Okay? So Zionism is a fulfillment of a prophecy. Let's meet some key people. Rav Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer. So in 1862, he wrote the Rishat Zion. Odell, what does that mean? So I'm using you as our Meturgemet, but
The demand.
the Rishat, Lidrosh. Yes, demanding Zion. So he writes, it's the first Zionist book that's grounded. Again, Herzl's works are not grounded in religious. He doesn't quote Gemara, right? Much to your shock. He doesn't quote Mishnah and Psukim in his major books. He quotes a little bit, but it's not based on it. Kalischer's work is based on Torah sources, and he argues that the final redemption is up to us now to hasten and fulfill. We set the agenda. He also argued the best way to convince the world of the merits of Zionism was to base our claim in religion and spirituality. Now, why is that different to secular Zionism? It's enormously different.
It's completely different.
It makes no sense though, because if all these other countries are like Christians and they believe in all these sources, they also believe in Israel. It's also mentioned in most of that
So it
stuff.
may be playing to the evangelical audience
So
a little
it makes
bit.
more
But also
sense. It
without
has more of
even-
a case.
Even without evangelical Christians, the world is much more religious back then than it is now.
Yeah, well, there are
And Christian in particular, so it had these same prophets in common.
Notice that absent from his arguments, really, in any strong way, is anti-Semitism. That we're not arguing from a political perspective. We must have a state because we're suffering, because of anti-Semitism. We're suffering, and because we're suffering, we want to bring about the
Mashiach
Geula, the final redemption. Why do we want to bring about the final redemption?
for everyone.
Really, really important to understand this about religious Zionism. The purpose of the final redemption, a subsidiary of it, is it solves anti-Semitism. But the main purpose of the final redemption is, Mark, you said it before, to rebuild.
To rebuild the temple.
Why are we rebuilding the temple? It's prime land. You give Temple Mount to Trump, he'll build high-rise towers with a casino and a golf club. He'll be worth billions. You know how much an apartment's worth in the old city of Jerusalem? Millions, yeah? Why do we want to rebuild the temple?
It's Hashem's
For
place
fun?
on earth. It's Hashem's place on earth.
We want Hashem to be manifest in this world, and with a temple we understand that all the hundreds of mitzvot that we currently can't keep, even if we live in Israel, we want to bring those back. So religious Zionism says, yeah, a benefit of all this is that we solve anti-Semitism, but the main goal, and I'm going to emphasize this very carefully, and if this recording ever gets out, I'm going to be in so much trouble, but it helps you to understand what is going on today in the West Bank. It helps you to understand why there are certain fringe elements in the religious Zionist camp who don't care if their actions cause an increase in anti-Semitism around the world, because that's not what we're really solving. That's just a secondary thing. If what we do in our behaviour increases anti-Semitism, so be it. The main goal is a religious one, a spiritual one, rebuilding the temple, bringing about the final redemption.
Isn't it also a
Get back to it.
mitzvah to live in Israel? To live in the Holy
Yes,
Land.
yeah.
And
Famously, just walking around in it is called a mitzvah. Like Avraham was told, walk haloch v'nasoah hanegba, just carry on travelling wherever you walk in Israel. And I grew up in a Bnei Akiva. Boreham Wood is all we have, Bnei Akiva. So I grew up in the Lord's Society,
I guess that they hold the promise that the land is theirs and it's meant to be for them and they're meant to.
100%. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we believe that as well. Neturei Karta also believes that. That's why I tell people
But
if they ever.
It's not the right time.
No, it's the irony of like I get sent videos sometimes of we'll get to Neturei Karta, don't worry, where they're standing protesting alongside Palestinians, and I laugh because I'm like, you really think I don't disagree vehemently with them, but these people next to them, you really think that they believe that the land is yours? No, they believe the same Torah. They just interpreted it really, really differently. They believe Hashem's promised it to us, but it's not the time for that promise to be fulfilled. We'll get to the very
But even though anti-Semitism is not mentioned,
the
timing suggests that anti-Semitism is a driver.
Absolutely.
Or was there a book 200 years earlier that said the same thing?
No, it's definitely a driver, but it's the catalyst that says enough's enough. Perhaps it's upon us. The onus is upon us. Instead of sitting around waiting for the redemption, we should hasten its arrival. That's the big switch, and this is going to be one of the single biggest differences between Haredi Judaism and religious Zionism Judaism that still today causes a massive rift in Israel. If you're following Israeli politics, particularly things like drafting to the army, we'll see where that manifests.
So it's a bit like when a child wants something, but they didn't want it 5 minutes ago. They want it now because their siblings got it. I know it's not quite the same.
It's not quite. It's not quite.
I was just trying to think of an
It's
example.
a bit more subtle.
I was trying to think of an example whereby
Yeah.
the timing indicates that the real motivation isn't the one that's being given sometimes.
It's not the main. It's not the main guy. I think Adam. Let's dive a little bit into Rav Kook because it comes out in Rav Kook's. So Rav Kook, you've heard of Rav Kook?
Yeah.
He was a rabbi here for 3 years. He was stuck in England during World War One. A tremendous Talmid Chacham and an amazing person. Whose love, really, his love for every Jew just overflowed. He was in, how do you pronounce this? Spitalfields? Spitalfields, Brick Lane. He was the Rav there for 3 years. He then was approached to become the Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem and eventually the first Ashkenazi Chief Rabbi of British Mandate Palestine. We're not sure what he really felt about Herzl. He gave a eulogy of sorts when Herzl died that was... But everyone condemned it. One side said you're being too positive, and one side said you're being too negative. It's like a certain broadcaster in this country that everyone thinks is very, very anti them. Yeah, seems to be. So Rav Kook, essentially, the Yiddish for it is chap. You know what chap means?
Take as much as you can.
Chaparein. Yeah, a chap is like it means his take. His take that became the bedrock of religious Zionism is that he saw, very important, I hope I get this right and clear, he saw within secular Zionism the seeds of the same ambition. So he saw the secular Zionists, even though they're doing it unwittingly and sometimes reluctantly, they're playing a role in bringing about the final redemption. Even if what they think they're doing is establishing a protectorate of Germany in the Middle East, which I think would have been hilarious. Yeah? Wouldn't that be hilarious, seeing Germans walking around in the Middle East?
Would have been so funny in 1933.
After then. No, I don't mean then. That would have been terrible.
Maybe Israel wouldn't be so chutzpahdik, they'll be all very mensch like that.
They would actually queue for
No.
things.
Yes.
Yeah, there'd be queues for things, yeah. Things would be on time. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Be a bit more yekish. Things would be on time, but it wouldn't be as fun. That's the difference. So, in Rav Kook's ideology, he understood that the secular Zionists were just this preparatory step towards the real goal, but he understood as well the real goal is final redemption, rebuild the temple, bring all the mitzvot back, bring Hashem's presence back into this world, and in his opinion, it was okay to have a secular democracy initially, but that should be transformed into a theocracy, as in Torah law, as soon as politically possible. Okay? So he's not that far away from Kalisha, but because he had this ideology, you then had a movement that is completely fine with being fully immersed and involved politically in the function and the day-to-day life of the state of Israel, which is why religious Zionists are known in the army as, they're often like the fiercest fighters, because they're fully involved in building and establishing the state, but they're also fighting, believing, which in a way they're right, we're fighting a just war, because this is our homeland. Hashem has promised us this land. That's how religious Zionism is enmeshed into the state. Any questions? Final one, which is Rav Moshe Glasner. Okay, and we'll get back to this ideology very, very shortly. He seemed to be, and I may have misinterpreted his writing, so forgive me if I have, he seems to be quite against liberal democracy. Even as a starting, again, Rav Kook, again, any I'm going to say this bluntly, any religious Jew is against liberal democracy in the way it works in the West. Yeah, it's Torah law. Doesn't mean people are forced to keep the Torah, but the Torah is the standard of the state. That's how a religious Jew should really see things. If we believe Torah is true, and it's been given by Hashem, that's probably how we should live our lives. Do we have to? No. What we do in private? Your own business. But that's the gold standard. Rabbi Glasner pushed back on Kalisha and Kook and said, why are you copying the democratic systems of the countries that aren't Jewish, don't care about Jews, and persecute you? Stop doing it. What we need instead is nationalism. Jewish nationalism, the same way we had it back in the times of Tanakh, when we had kings and we had a temple. Very much. It was a Jewish national endeavour. So in his opinion, any establishment of the state should be used to push a Jewish agenda. Now there are bits of this ideology in the state of Israel. You've heard of the Rabbanut? Odell, what's the Rabbanut? Please explain to us British people.
It's like the base din.
Rabbanut Harashi is what?
It's like the base din here, no?
No, not at all.
I mean, you have to.
Because the basin here is enjoys an act of parliament, but it's not parliament, is it?
Rabbanut is parliament then.
In what areas?
Jewish parliament.
In what areas?
Marriage.
Divorce, kashrut, Shabbat. So there are certain areas of day-to-day life.
Of Israel,
yes, and what the Rabbanut says is law. And anyone who breaks that law finds that they're not in trouble with a bunch of rabbis, they're in trouble with the authorities, which has led in modern Israel to constant argument, which is, we're meant to be a liberal democracy. Why is there a bunch of bearded men telling us what to do?
But then if you're religious,
Sheila
it's really
Tova.
good for them.
No, because the religious in Israel is not religious enough for them.
I'm saying
You can't
if you're a
win.
religious
Odell, these are
person-
Israelis, you know them better than me, yeah?
But I'm saying here you can't uphold the base thing so much, and you've got to still fight through, let's say, marriages, divorces, and stuff. The base
Yes.
thing doesn't have so much power.
No,
Israel has
not at all. Yeah,
immense
you can
power.
go to the
So
secular
you don't give a
courts.
jet,
Yeah, correct.
or
You can go to secular
it's
courts. You
very,
can sue
very-
someone. Yeah, 100%.
I guess if you went back in the UK 100 and something years ago to where marriage was entirely governed by the Church of England, it would be like that.
Yes.
It would-
It's like
yeah.
that.
They would have had the authority,
Yeah.
not the MP.
So marriage is a good
Or the judges.
example. So and I'm seeing this as well with sadly recently, I've had an influx of aliyah requests from members, and I have to write the letter confirming that they're Jewish. Now, who sets the guidelines of what needs to be in that letter? The Rabbanut. And God bless them, they shift the goalposts every 2 weeks because the way you were, the order of the sentence wasn't what we want. The comma's in the wrong place. Can you please do it again? Why? Kacha. Yeah? So there are certain areas where the Rabbanut of Israel has pretty much absolute authority, and there is constant pushback by secular Israelis who say this isn't what we signed up for, and it's not what secular Zionism was ever about. And I say, even if I don't agree with that, that's a good question. Which is why nowadays, do you know why Cyprus became such a popular destination for Israelis? It's not just because it's next door.
Because they can live on the law, secular law.
It's the cheapest place to go that's safe to get a civil marriage. So you pop over to Cyprus, nice and cheap, quick flight, get civilly married, and come back again. And done.
But then they lose the benefits of being married through the Rabbanut
They
of
do,
Israel.
but they don't want to be married through the Rabbinate of Israel because they're ideologically opposed to it. Who's going to stop them?
married in church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I'm saying in Israel, then you get that cover,
Because
you know.
it's not recognised.
Exactly, not recognised.
It's a complicated
You
one.
know, then it's all about the marriages then. Because if you get divorced, then the Rabbanut makes you pay, for your spouse, for your kids. It's more held. It's you're in that. Here,
No.
It's
There's only so much that
it
basting
keeps-
can do
If
here.
you're religious,
Yeah.
it keeps you safe in a way.
Yeah.
Those people.
Shall we do anti-Zionism? Any questions? So that's secular and religious Zionism.